We all know that whenever Donald Trump opens his mouth, it is bound to backfire. But it's not just that it backfires on Donald Trump, but it also backfires on his Trump stooges. Because after Donald Trump makes a mess with some ridiculous speech, some ridiculous town hall or interview, his stooges have to jump to the rescue and try to clean it up. But of course, when Donald Trump is threatening democracy, calling out the enemies from within, or talking about Arnold Palmer's manhood, it's a little bit more difficult for them to do. And so not only do they end up humiliating themselves with their disingenuous defense, but they end up humiliating Donald Trump even more. It's a beautiful cycle for us, and it's terrible for them. And we saw an example of that today when Republican Congressman and Trump stooge Byron Donalds appeared on Jim Acosta's show and was pressed on those comments Donald Trump made about Arnold Palmer's stuff. And it did not go well for Byron Donalds, and we are going to check out all of that. But before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already, to hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way. It really means the world to me. Now, before we get into Byron Donalds just crumbling, just dying inside when asked about Trump's comments, I think we should take a look at another question he was asked.
In every major city in the country, that is very dangerous. It's something that's concerning.
So you would be okay with Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi being deemed the enemy from within? Would you go along with them being rounded up? Would you go along with them being arrested?
Absolutely not. And listen, and let's be very clear, Donald Trump didn't even say that. He said he was concerned. He said that, yes, you have somebody like Adam Schiff who would use his position as chairman of the Intel Committee, who has access to information that even members of Congress don't have access to, and to leak that into the press.
Byron, if you were really not okay with Donald Trump calling for Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff to be rounded up, then you would have already called out his enemies from within comments, because as we know from those closest to Trump and his administration, he did want to go after his political enemies, but there will be no guardrails on the crazy, insane, out of his mind Donald Trump in a second term if he were to win it. There would be no one holding him back. So you are just endorsing that when you allow those comments to happen. His words have consequences. They mean something. And they mean something when they're not just angry, aggrieved, and dangerous. They mean something when they're just deranged. Like we saw with his monologue, it was almost 10 minutes about Arnold Palmer's junk. And when Byron Donalds was asked about that, he really just died inside. He crumbled because he knows it's over for Donald Trump if he continues to say stuff like this. And I want to check out that whole interaction.
He's also made a lot of crude comments lately, talking about the golfer Arnold Palmer, talking about Arnold Palmer's genitalia. Is this the way a president should speak?
Jim, with all due respect to the question that you just asked me, none of that matters to what the American people are going to deal with in 14 days, excuse me. Because over the next 14 days, voters are going to decide, do they want a president who's actually going to have a sound economy where prices are under control? Do they want a president who's going to secure our southern border and hold for this one, so that young girls are not raped by the drug cartels in the journey to our southern border? Because that's what's happening right now, Jim. You have young girls who are being victimized by the coyotes and by the drug cartels simply because Kamala Harris and Joe Biden could not do the right thing, which is to secure our southern border. So if you want to talk about a story he told about Arnold Palmer, or the fact that young girls are being sold into sex slavery today because of Kamala Harris's wide open borders, I will tell you, give me a story about Arnold Palmer, but secure the country and save these young girls from being victimized by the drug cartels, because Kamala Harris doesn't care about that. She's not lifted a finger to secure our southern border. And so where are the stories?
I guess my question, though, Congressman,
young girls who are given Plan B, who are put on birth control because they're being trafficked into the United States by weak border policy? That's the issue that the American people are having to deal with right now, not his story about Arnold Palmer.
But doesn't it, I guess my question is, the larger question is, when you have a president, a former president, somebody who's running for president, talking about Democrats as being the enemy from within, when he's making lewd comments about professional golfers, doesn't a candidate's character matter? Does Donald Trump have the character, in your view, to be the president of the United States?
Well, let's examine that. First of all, I will say yes, he does. You know why? Because he's been president. and the country was better off when he was president. The world was actually safe when he was president, where there were no new wars when he was president. So he did a very good job. The American people remember that. But let's compare that to his opponent, Kamala Harris. She's running around the country telling the American people that these rich people need to all pay their fair share in taxes. Meanwhile, her boss, Joe Biden, his son is a tax evader. So she's going to try to lecture the American people about paying their fair share, but she didn't say a word when Hunter Biden was evading taxes. What does that say about character, Jim? I'll ask you that question. Because it's about what you do when you're in office. It's about the policies you pursue. It's about how effective they are in the lives of the American people. And yes, it is about keeping our troops safe and not being the last person in the room when Joe Biden signed off on the most disastrous withdrawal in the history of our country. We lost 13 soldiers. And by the way, let's talk about Kamala Harris's character. She wasn't even there at the dignified transfer when those 13 soldiers came home. She wasn't there, and Joe Biden was busy checking his watch. So if you're going to talk about character, Jim, let's really talk about it. Yeah. Let's not talk about stories about Arnold Palmer. Let's talk about the reality of leadership and the lack thereof from Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. This is why Donald Trump's going to be the next president of the United States.
I mean, do you find it entertaining when he's making these kinds of comments? I mean, is that something you want kids to hear?
Jim, what I want is a president who's going to do the job of commander-in-chief. What I want is a president who's going to follow the law and execute the law, not run around the law like Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have done. I want a president that's going to make sure that, yes, we are energy dominant on the world stage, that the American people have jobs where they can actually get ahead in life. That's what I want in a president. And quite frankly, that's what the majority of our country wants in a president. You could talk about stories about Arnold Palmer all you want, but that does not matter when people got to put food on the table. That's stuff for your show. It might be good for your show. It's not good for the American people.
Well, I'm just asking, Congressman, because, you know, a president of the United States is a role model. Is that the behavior of a role model, would you say? Talking about Arnold Palmer, talking about Democrats as being the enemy from within. Is that a role model?
And I will tell you right now, we don't have that now. We do not have success. We have failure. And Kamala Harris is just a new face on the same failure. And that's why she's being rejected by the American people.
All right. Congressman Byron Donalds, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it. So
he is trying to deflect, trying to skate the argument that Donald Trump is completely out of his mind at this point because he knows it to be true. And there's nothing he can do to try to prove otherwise. If it was Joe Biden who said that, Byron Donalds would have still been talking about it. So I don't want to hear that this isn't what matters and this isn't what the American people care about. They care if their president is in cognitive decline like Donald Trump is. So yes, it absolutely matters. And it's not just the things that Donald Trump is saying, but the things he wants people to not be able to say. And that'll make a little bit more sense after we check out this ad from Kamala Harris for some context.
My mother raised us to believe in the possibility of America and the power of hard work. And if she ever heard us complain, she'd ask us, well, what are you going to do about it? And when it comes to politics, some would prefer to run on a problem rather than solve a problem. Well, I believe in solving problems. My plan cuts taxes for 100 million Americans and lowers costs for groceries, medicine, and housing. Let's turn the page on the politics of pettiness and chart a new way forward. I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
Kamala Harris is talking about fighting price gouging and making sure we're building a better future. That's a great political ad. But what did Donald Trump have to say about her message, her agenda? Well, he said this right here.
But the level of lying is just incredible. I mean, to a point where I can't even imagine it's legal. I was asking some of these lawyers, some of the top guys, I said, can they absolutely, 2 weeks before an election, go out and do an ad where every one of your policies are the exact opposite? Isn't that election interference, and isn't that fraud? And isn't there a court that can do something about that?
Donald Trump thinks that it should be illegal for Kamala Harris to run an ad in which she's talking about her agenda. That's what he's saying there. That's the new ad that she's running that has Donald Trump so upset. Her talking about her upbringing, her talking about her agenda, and her talking about turning the page on Donald Trump. He thinks it should be illegal. Is there a better example of how this guy is a wannabe dictator? And it's not just me, it's not just you, it's not just Democrats who can see that this is wrong. J.D. Vance even had something to say about it.
What you'll never hear Donald Trump say is that you should be prevented from saying something because I disagree with it. And yet Kamala Harris, every single action that she's taken, everything that she says, she'll often defend, not disagreeing reasonably, not persuading her fellow citizens, but trying to silence her fellow citizens. And I think a person who believes in censorship is not fit to lead the world's greatest constitutional republic.
I hate to agree with J.D. Vance, but I guess I'm not agreeing with the accusation he's making, more the general sentiment of what he is saying. But yeah, if Donald Trump wants to censor people, if Donald Trump wants to strip CBS of their license, if Donald Trump doesn't want his political opponents to be able to run ads saying that Kamala Harris is lying, talking about her middle-class upbringing, talking about wanting to cut costs, wanting to make sure that people are protected from price gouging, he wants to censor that and stop it. Yeah, that is a person who is clearly unfit to be president. And we have to keep talking about that. We have to keep talking about that. We have to keep calling it out. And we are going to every single day on the show. And if you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button. You can leave a like on this video. And if you're stuck around to the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I'll see you soon.